joining. I know it's getting a little close to lunchtime, so hopefully you guys can bear with me a bit longer to hear some more about virtual reality. Emily just gave a great intro into some of the things that are going on right now, but hopefully I can channel some of my experience over the last 2 years in creating virtual reality content to give you some insight into how, when, and why you should use VR. So let's start with a little bit of context. Show of hands, how many of you guys actually had one of these? Okay, like 5 people. I think my dad had one. I shouldn't even ask this, but how many of you have one of these now? Yeah, pretty much everyone. So, as you know, this is now enabling this. And what I want you all to keep in mind as we go along here today, we're in what I like to lovingly refer to as the Zach Morris days of virtual reality. While not everyone had access to those brick phones back in the early days, it was definitely attractive to most people to have one. And most importantly, we couldn't even begin to fathom that it would fundamentally change the way we as society are functioning right now. Yes, just like that brick phone, VR is super clunky and it's very literal right now. But I firmly believe that we're on our way to developing a technology that is likely the next to revolutionize our lives. So why am I such an authority? I'm the executive producer and co-founder of Framestore's virtual reality studio. If you're not familiar with Framestore, we're an Oscar-winning visual effects company. We like to name drop Gravity a lot, but we've been doing high-end visual effects for TV and film for over the last 30 years. At Framestore, I head up the team that's dedicated to exploring and producing virtual reality content in all of its forms. We work directly with brands and agencies, studios, directors, ourselves, pretty much anyone who wants to take a risk and do something extraordinary and groundbreaking in a headset. In the last 2 years, we've done over probably more VR projects than any other studio out there. And for major brands in IP like HBO's Game of Thrones, Paramount's Interstellar, Marriott Hotels, Volvo, Marvel's Avengers, among many others. So I was invited by Most Contagious to talk to you guys about VR and advertising and why you as marketers should maybe be taking it a little more seriously and why it's something to invest in. In the last 2 years since we started the studio, we've made some of the most groundbreaking VR work out there, a lot of which has served a marketing purpose. So I also spend a lot of time speaking with brands and agencies about how they can use VR as a new medium in their world for advertising. Sure, it can be used as a tool for things like product demos, installations, stunts, point of sale, et cetera, but more often than not, I find myself trying to convince advertisers to think about VR differently than they would any other platform. VR is a user-first medium. This means that you're not asking people to watch your ads in between their favorite episode of Scandal, or before the latest video of a hedgehog playing a piano, or to get extra coins in Plants vs. Zombies. Who knows? In the next few years, the landscape could change, but right now, you're asking people to stop what they're doing, put on a headset, which, fun fact, by definition in America, qualifies you as legally blind during that time, and voluntarily watch your advertisement. So, you better make it really valuable for the user, which, to be clear, is not your TV commercial in 360 degrees. For example, things people are probably not interested in. Downloading a 600 megabyte app on their phone, which if you're anything like me, you probably have to clear space for, just to watch a tour of your factory and hear some guy with an accent talk about how he designed your latest model. Great, thanks, I'm going back to the Mindy project, don't bother me again. That's not me, by the way. So yeah, and a lot of marketers are having a really hard time seeing the value of VR, of the value of VR in the spend right now. VR can cost as much or more than any other traditional arm of a marketing campaign. And even though more and more people are picking up the VR headset every day, the audience is still relatively small compared to what marketers are used to looking at. So if you were hoping I'd present any stats from my previous projects or any data around things like KPI and ROI, I'm not. Because guess what? There is none. And what does exist is probably not going to impress any of the data heads out there. Those numbers can't measure VR yet. So they'll never tell you that this is a good return on investment now. But I will. I can tell you from experience that if you're looking to reach people with something incredibly powerful, you found it. Take the risk. Be an early mover. We did. So about 2 years ago, I got the dream brief. Show of hands, how many Game of Thrones fans do we have out there? Yeah, not as many as I'd like, thanks. All right. Well, I'm a huge Thrones nerd, and I have no problem admitting that I've read the books twice. This is actually me meeting George for the first time. A big life moment, clearly. So, back to my dream brief. Create the world's first virtual reality experience that will take you to Castle Black in Westeros. In 2014, we launched at South by Southwest. We were able to work with the event agency that does the big global touring exhibition with the Iron Throne, the props, etc., to create a set of physical winch elevators, which you see here, set in Castle Black. And once the participants stepped inside the physical elevators, they were in exactly the same virtual elevator, which would take them up the 700-foot ice wall in Castle Black. As they went up the elevator, the floor beneath them physically rumbled, and as they walked out onto the ledge of the ice wall, they were blasted with ice-cold air. And as all things in Game of Thrones end, well, all men must die. But you're probably saying, like, Christine, what? Fans, rumbling floors? That sounds a little hokey. And I was kind of like, we were the same. When the event company was like, yeah, we want to put rumbling floors in, we were like, ugh, really? What is this, Disney World? But it was funny, we actually didn't end up hooking everything up all together until probably about 2 days before the event. We really like to live on the edge. And I remember the first time I got into the elevator with everything hooked up and I put on the headset, I was like, at that point I was so desensitized. I'm like, I've been looking at this thing for 3 months, not this thing again. And I put the headset on and the floor started to rumble and I grabbed onto the elevator and I was like, holy fucking shit, it's crazy. And it was like a completely different experience. And what you realize, and if you're looking at the graphics there, they kind of look a little game engine-y because it was made in a game engine. But what you realize is that your senses start to compensate one another. And while your visuals might not be 100% realistic, if you trigger other senses, your brain starts to do this thing where it's kind of like, maybe I am there after all. So as we sat there for 5 days, 12 hours a day, watching thousands of people go through, we watched every single one of their reactions. It was unbelievable. In my 10 years of producing experiential advertising, I'd never seen people react to anything like this. They screamed, they yelled, often for their mothers, they cursed, and some of them were just baffled into silence. And here's just one of the reactions. I think you'll notice her as the actress that plays Arya Stark from Game of Thrones. She wasn't acting. So our last day in Austin, Texas, we're all sitting in this tacky bar, and we had this, giant tower of beer, because that's how they serve beer in Texas. And we're all sitting around, and we're like, we pretty much need to throw everything else that we're doing out the window and just focus on VR. So we convinced the powers that be at Framestore to let us do that, and that's what we did. So let's get back to Zach and what the last 2 years of making content has taught us. Not all VR experiences are created equal. The hardest thing in VR and doing presentations is actually, I never know how much my audience knows. So promise last survey, how many people have done a VR experience of any kind? That's a lot of people, most of you. Okay. How many have done a mobile phone-based VR experience? Also most of you. Now, how many people have done a more immersive-based VR experience with Vive, Oculus, PlayStation VR, where they can really explore and interact within the environment? Way less of you. Okay. So I mention this because each of these groups of headsets at the current moment enable different types of content. And it's really important for you to understand these because they're apples and oranges, really. So let's go back to the mobile powered. These are your Gear VR, your Google Cardboard, and similar. They basically utilize a mobile device. What's good about that, and it's probably most importantly, it utilizes a device that's already in our pockets. You all told me how many of you have them. And as far as headsets go right now, these are going to have a larger reach. You heard about the Google Cardboards reaching over 1 million people last month, which is amazing. They're also portable, and cardboards can be a really low-cost way to work VR into things like limited edition packaging. You heard about cereal boxes, shoe boxes. Really interesting. But, one of the things about mobile-powered VR that not a lot of people understand is there's no way to track your position in space accurately, and there's a limit on the graphics capabilities of phones. So this means that content often ends up being pre-rendered video to look realistic. Let's talk about pre-rendered content. The great thing about it is it can look as good as film. This is a shot from our Avengers VR experience. And because this is a video, and we watch videos all the time on our smartphones, it requires very little from a GPU perspective, so it'll run the same on most up-to-date smartphones. What doesn't it do? Well, it limits interactivity and your ability to freely explore environments. Interactivity, as you can see from the front end of our Avengers experience, is often limited to overlays and hotspots of sorts. As I mentioned, there's no positional tracking, so you're essentially stationary on a rotating single axis, sort of like a music box ballerina. And let's talk about all the woes that come with shooting live action for 360. One, what you shoot is what you get. There's no clever editing techniques that you can put together the story if you don't get the take that you want. Details tend to fall off at a certain distance. We've realized that there's sort of the sweet spot with shooting VR between about 4 to 10 feet. Anything closer than 4 to 5 feet, and it'll start to be distorted and be incredibly difficult to stitch perfectly. Anything further than 10 feet, and faces will start to look pixelated in the phones. And I'll tell you, from lots of experience, there is no plug-and-play way to shoot and stitch high-quality 3D 360 content. A lot of you might have seen things like this over the past few years and think, oh great, job done. There's a button I can push somewhere that puts us all together, right? Not so much. These companies are absolutely making amazing strides in making VR cameras available to the masses. But it's not really a solution that I can offer my client that wants to spend $25 million shooting Beyonce in VR. And it's often lower resolution and nearly impossible to stitch perfectly. To create perfect, seamless, high production value VR content, you're looking at something that's largely a painstaking post-production task. Don't get me wrong, the tools in our software to manage it are getting better exponentially, and this is only the 2-year mark. So this is a video from the Marriott experience that we shot in Beijing. And as you can see, our compositors are layering in and constructing the environment in 360 degrees. This is 8 weeks of painstaking work in 1 minute. See, they're putting it together. And then they really start layering, you'll see they start layering in a lot of the texture. And because we use higher-end cameras, we can really bump up the colors and make it quite vivid. One thing you'll know about shooting content in 360 is that you don't always get the best takes in every direction at once. So our actor, who wasn't a real actor, who's a real person, after about the 59th take, we got, the best take of him, but all the other takes of the environment weren't that great. So we had to isolate him and put him in the best take of the environment. Quite painstaking. So, if pre-rendered VR content gives you that experience as if you're a music box ballerina, then real-time rendered content would equate to a ballerina dancing through a stage. Right now, this is only enabled by these types of headsets. Sure, they're a bit clunkier, they're tethered, and they require additional hardware like a PC or a console, which can make them more expensive. But what's great is they have positional tracking, so they give you the ability to explore wider spaces. They all ship with input and hand tracking devices, so you can really interact within your environment using your hands. And because of bigger GPUs that are attached to PCs and consoles, we're not just limited to pre-rendered video. We're able to make real-time rendered graphics look much more photoreal than on phones. On phones, you can definitely make real-time rendered content, but it's not going to look as good as this. This is a capture of our Interstellar experience. This is all done in Game Engine. And what's great about content that sits on a game engine is it's by nature interactive. So if we wanted with this, it's on Rails right now, which means we're just pushing you through the environment. But if we wanted, we could allow you to freely walk around the environment. We could allow you to use the hand tracking tools to open each of those cabinets, to pick things up, lift them up, throw them at somebody, push buttons and operate the spaceship. Sky's the limit. So why is this amazing? Well, let's look at the definition of VR from Wikipedia. Virtual reality replicates an environment that simulates physical presence, we'll come back to this, in places in the real world or imagined world, and lets the user interact in that world. Virtual reality's artificial